Hi, everybody. Mike Donahue and Brian May here. Listen to some music. Listen to Roxy, music by Roxy, and it's called Love is a Drug. Love is the drug that something gets me through. You like that song, Brian?
I do. I do. It's fitting for today's topic.
Yes, it is. So today we are talking about love bombing, the drug that is used in churches and pedophiles and sex traffickers to lure people in. I mean, we're making light of it. Sorry about that, because it is such a heavy subject. But I mean, it's ironic because there's a lot of irony in that song that love is a drug. And so today we want to kind of unpack the idea that uh, churches in general can sometimes use love to lure people into their dogma, into their churches, and not what I want to make something clear from the very beginning of this. We're not saying that every church does this. We're not saying
Right.
that every church uses love to manipulate people. There are churches that really do love their community and love people and do it well. But there are some that have really learned how to leverage that word and leverage, that the meaning of the essence of that word to lure people in. I always say when I'm talking to, especially groups of teenagers who have been really hurt by people, I'll say love. The word love has done way more damage in my life than the word hate. Because if you hate me, excuse me, if you hate me and I know you hate me, I will never open up to you. I mean, there's no way that I'm going to give you
Yeah.
any secrets of my life. But if you love me and I'm convinced that you really do love me, you're dangerous to me now because my walls are going to come down and there's going to be, I'm vulnerable to you. And so I want to read out of the book Groomed, out of my book Groomed. I want to read the definition of love bombing, and it comes out of from a psychology professor, Margaret Singer, in her book "The Cults in Our Midst." She said, uh, basically, she's describing love bombing, which the way Brian and I grew up, it was actually they rephrased the term and called it frog kissing, but we'll make sense of that in a minute. But basically, her definition of love bombing is this: she said, as soon as any interest is shown by the recruits, they may be love bombed by the recruiter or other cult members. This process of feigning friendship, which is basically faking or pretending friendship and interest in the recruit, was originally associated with one of the early youth cults. But soon it was taken up by a number of groups, because it works, as part of their program for luring people in. Love bombing is a coordinated effort, usually under the direction of leadership, that involves long-term members flooding recruits and newer members with flattery, verbal seduction, affectionate but usually non-sexual touching, and lots of attention to their every remark. So, Brian, we were talking off camera about how why people are so vulnerable to love. Why is that such an effective tool when it comes to luring people in to a church, to a way of thinking, a cult, basically? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, first of all, I think as human beings that we have an innate, built in desire and capacity for love, both to love others and to be loved. We want to belong. And the deepest experience of belonging is to be loved, and to be accepted and to be valued by a person, a group, a community.
Right. So our experience is similar with the same person that you worked for her at the church. I'm sorry, at the school. I was involved in the church leadership and the youth group specifically, and we were taught that we not only that happened to us as individuals. Me personally, I explain this in my book that I came from a very dysfunctional home situation with my mom, and when this person basically said, "You can call me mom," and took on that role, that mom loving role, it lured me, and I was deep in. So when I got involved in that, um, I, not only did I learn, receive that from her, but then was taught how to do that with others in my small group. We talked about that in the book about how the small group ministry was, the bread and butter, and every individual under shepherd, they called them under shepherds, were responsible for bringing people into their group, and you had
Yeah.
to get up every week and tell how many people were in your group. So there was a lot of pressure to build and grow the group, because it would grow the big group. So we were taught how to love bomb. They called it frog kissing, which was the idea that you kissed people or loved people, and you had to, in that process, you were basically discerning whether this person was going to turn into a prince or a princess, or somebody was just what they called precious, which was somebody who didn't quite meet that standard. And that's what you were doing. You were kissing frogs or kissing people, loving people, to see if what would emerge would be somebody that would be productive in the ministry. And it was really kind of a formula that was put in place to filter out people that weren't going to be really, useful to the ministry. And it was love bombing.
It was more than a formula, it was an intentional tactic. I mean, she and her acolytes knew what they were doing, and they trained people like you and me that this was normal. This is what you did. This is we were actually convinced we were doing the right thing and actually helping people by making them feel valuable and loved, and like they found a place finally where they belonged. I mean, when my wife and I came into the church, that's how we felt. She came right after us from the beginning, and pulled us next to herself. We had these retreats, right? We'd have these weekend retreats, and we'd break up in all these little rap cells. And before we even went on a retreat, we learned that, I mean, you struck gold if you were in her rap cell. And the very first retreat, my wife Cheryl was in her rap cell. Very second retreat, I was in her rap cell. It's like, let me pull you close. Let me pull you close. So
Yeah. And it feels good. I mean, let's
it
be
does.
honest.
It does.
It's a great feeling when the head of any organization
Yeah.
targets you, points you out, and says, I want you to be next to me. When I described in my book the grooming techniques of these pedophiles that were in Boston. They did the same thing. I was selling subscriptions to a newspaper down Cape Cod, and because I can talk, I was able to get more subscriptions than most people. And so my boss wanted to talk to me. I remember the feeling I had when that guy wanted to talk to me. It was amazing, and he knew it. He knew exactly what he was doing. And then, as I described in the book, it took a turn. But basically, that's what I experienced in the church world too. Was that it's that bombing at the beginning of a bunch of attention, and then the rules change. Once you're part of the club and you're in the inner sanctum, I should say, or you're one of the trusted ones.
Right.
We had labels. We were under shepherds. Once you're one of those, then there were expectations, and the rules changed. All of a sudden, now, yeah, you're loved, but you got to perform. And if you don't, you feel it. You know that love is going to pull back. That's really manipulative, don't you think?
Yeah, it's heinous in its manipulation is the word I would use. And we all experienced that. You didn't even have to be in the youth group. If you were just a member of the church, and you had a talent, ability, something like that, they would do the same thing to you there. But yeah, you would have this sort of honeymoon period when you first came in, when basically you just felt like everybody's happy that I'm here. But it became apparent pretty clear that there were certain obligations you had to fulfill if you wanted to sustain that connection and that relationship, and of course you wanted to sustain it. I mean, that's what hooked you. That's what brought you in. And so it was a very effective tool in getting people to produce and do the things that they wanted them to do. And that's textbook manipulation.
I think one of the things, when you say heinous, I think another thing that comes to mind is the gathering of information that love that you feel from, like, I was specifically this person, the love that I felt from her gave me, it made me want to tell her everything. It made me want to tell her my weaknesses, where I was struggling.
Right.
And that, what I didn't realize at the time was she was filing that stuff and putting it
Yeah.
in a place where she could weaponize it later. And I didn't realize she was doing that. I
Yeah.
I just felt like, man, this lady really loves me and really believes in me, knows that I'm really messed up. At times I have, I'm a human. I have weaknesses. So, but she's going to cover those because, they use that scripture that love covers a multitude of sin. And so you just, oh, she's covering that. She's just going to, love me anyways. But then what I didn't realize, like I said, was later she weaponized that information and gave it to other people. I'm pretty sure she was using that information while I was up there. I didn't realize that she was. I realized it later as, she was talking to people after I left. But while I was there, I think she was actually even using that information to bolster somebody else who may have been in competition with me, or that kind of thing. And so that to me is heinous. Like that,
Yeah.
that's using love to really hurt somebody.
Yeah, it is. When I was teaching, we had chapel on Tuesdays, and she would come to the school, and she would be there all day long, and she would be taking kids out of classes and taking them and doing this kind of thing to them, right? Just lavishing her love upon them for whatever reason. But what she would do with staff is she would take people like, I think I've mentioned before that there were a few of us that were just really advocates for the students and were really pushing back against some of the crazy rules at the school. And she would take us into her confidence and ask us questions and get our opinion on what was going on and what we thought, what was wrong and what we should be doing. And at first you sort of felt like, okay, I have a chance to impact something here. I can work with her to help these kids because that's what we were there to do. And I believe you're right, Mike. I believe that all of that time she had her little filing cabinet of information and she could pull that out and use it as leverage either for her or against you if she ever needed to.
Right. And to me, that's so twisted in its motive. Like that's not real love. Like that's not real love. Real love actually does cover sin. It doesn't manipulate it and weaponize it and use, to be used
Yeah.
later. And I grew up like that. I grew up in a home that was dysfunctional, and if you were ever vulnerable, it wasn't a good thing. So it triggered me a lot. Like when I realized that she was really doing that and taking what I said and twisting it and using it for her advantage, it really hurt me. I mean, I was really devastated by that. And I think it confuses you too when it comes to God, because it's so godlike to be loved like that. It's so
It is.
godlike, to be loved and to feel safe with information and to feel vulnerable and you're not exposed. And that's what I think God does. And so it feels good. That's like the allure of it. It pulls you. It's like, this feels right. But then later when it gets flipped on its head and you're like, oh, wait, that that's not right. That they just exposed me instead of covering
Yeah.
me. You wonder, like, is God like that? Does God do that? And that's what I think a lot of people are at sometimes too, in this whole deconstruction movement. There are a lot of people I've talked to that have said, I'm just confused about who God is, and that makes sense. Of course, you would be, because that representation is is important. And we're going to talk about that, but go ahead and give your comment on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I've said numerous times to people that if that's who I believed God was, then I would reject that God as well. I don't blame you for that because, I mean, that's not, anyway, who I understand God to be. Um, the other thing it does to you is that you're looking, if you're vulnerable and you're in that situation and you're looking to be validated and you're looking through value through that love, the love connection, right? Then, then when it starts to turn and when it starts to sour, you just don't go back to where you started. There's a
Good
there's a
point.
there's a pretty long fall. I mean, you begin to have this idea that, you are only valued for what you do or what you give or what you bring and that kind of a thing. And that just somehow gets inside you. And if if you're not strong, if you don't have a good circle, then that can take you down lower than you were when you first entered into that whole mess.
I think that's a great point. That really makes a lot of sense. That happened to me because when my marriage was over and I realized all the church people were turning their back on me and I wasn't valuable to them anymore, I didn't go back to where I was. It was worse, and I didn't understand that because
Yeah.
I grew up in a very very tough situation in Boston, but it was even worse than that
Mm.
because, and that was bad. I mean, that was horrible, but it was worse than that because of what you just said. It was, I thought I had found love, and what I found really was kind of love. It was an imitation, and I
Right.
kind of maybe use that as a springboard to this next, you know, uh, thought on this, which is the whole idea that, like, so my school program, my high school, I go into schools and talk to kids about their value and the core message in what we say to kids, because we can't bring a religious message into schools, and it's not the point anyways. But bottom line is, when we go into the schools, what I want kids people ask me all the time, well, what do you want the kids to leave, like when you leave, what do you want them to have? I want them to understand that they were born with value. They don't have to figure out if it was God or if it was the universe. That's up to them. That's not my job to convince them one way or the other. But the fact is that we all have intrinsic value. We all were born with value. So when we're love bombing people, really what we're doing, it's an imitation. We are replacing the value that they're born with with what we think of them, which is dangerous, right? I
Right.
think good shepherding and good discipleship is really helping people understand that they have an innate value that has nothing to do with their performance, nothing to do with what they do. They're just, God gave us, He created us in His image, and we have value because of that. Anything on top of that is what we should be doing with that is helping them. We're not creating value. We're not enhancing, but we are representing that value.
Right.
We are confirming that value, and that's what I want to do with every human being I meet, is to confirm the value they already have. You can't manipulate when you do it that way. When you're becoming the value, you're creating the value in them. That's manipulative. But when you're confirming the value that they already have, to me, that's discipleship. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I would I would describe wholeness as something that is very much rooted and grounded in what you talked about. Understanding that you have this innate, inherent value, that you were made with it, you were born with it. It's intrinsic to who you are. It's hard to forget that in this world, and a lot of times we go looking for that, and that's the problem here. And I like to use the analogy of a drug addict, and it's like people are missing this understanding of what their innate value is, and so they go looking for it. And they walk into, let's say, they walk into a church. Well, a good church will help them understand that that's where their value is, and they will help them discover what their true value is, what the real thing is. An unhealthy church is kind of like a pusher. They'll give you this drug, they'll give you this love bombing drug that will make you feel better for a while, right? And then when it wears off, you'll come back for more, and you come back for more, and you come back for more. And when that supply is cut off, then we all know, whether you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, I mean, going cold turkey isn't a pretty sight. It's devastating.
Right.
That's the way I understand. That's the metaphor I use to understand this whole dynamic.
I think that's right on. I think that's what I described in the book when that girl came up to me after I came back from China, and I just saw Christianity done right. I mean, it was just so in my face that it wasn't about ego. It wasn't about trying to build a church, build a kingdom to a man, to an ego. It was really to, to help people see their
Right.
value. And I came back, and this girl came up to me, and she was like, I'm leaving your youth group because I don't feel loved here. And I was fighting so hard because it wasn't her fault. I was mad at her, but I was mad at me. I was like, I created her. I told her that I am the author of her value. And when I stopped meeting those expectations for whatever reason, because there's a couple hundred kids in the youth group and she's not the only one, it it really floored her. She was like, "Where's all the love? I thought I was going to get loved here."
Yeah.
And she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. And I had to take a hard look in the mirror and go, "We're creating a monster here. We're creating dependent people that we're the drug pushers. We're pushing this love on them, and when we don't give them what they need, they tweak, they freak out because they're not getting it. And what we should be, it's slower and it takes longer, but what we should be doing is tapping them into the source of love. And I love the analogy of those two guys that knew their friend needed love, needed Jesus, needed healing, needed the source of
Right.
life, and they couldn't get to him, so they lowered him in on the roof. They cut a hole, lowered him down. I love that story because it shows you that these guys weren't the answer. They knew the answer. They knew what the answer was, and they got it. They did what they could get their friend in front of them, and that's what I want to do. With my life is not be anybody's hero, be the source, but to love them in a confirmation of what the Father already has for them, right? In Romans 8, it talks about the Spirit bearing witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. That's what the Spirit of God's always trying to do with us, is lure us into that strong relationship that He loves us no matter what. We are His children. We're not workers in the field. We're not associates. We're not business partners. We are His children. And the Spirit of God is luring us into that kind of security, that kind of love. And the church, unfortunately, taps into that sometimes and does it in a really selfish way.
Yeah. It's tragic when an institution that you expect to be selfless and be for you actually is are themselves very selfish rather than selfish, and very for themselves rather than for you, and you become an asset rather than a human being. And in the sense of the particular woman that Mike and I are talking about, she was in part she was filling that need the same way. She was filling that need to be loved by all of these things that she was doing, all of this love bombing, getting people just to love her and adore her and literally worship her. And the reason it continued to go along and it got worse and worse and worse is that, again, back to the drug analogy, that never satisfies. The only way we get to a place of wholeness in that respect is, again, understanding that innate value that we have.
Is God
Yep.
yeah, it's what we are created with, not manufactured. I want to read, not to be all whatever, but I love reading. I love, 1 Corinthians 13. We've all, heard it a million times, but it's the love chapter. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self seeking. It is not self seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always. I love the word always there, always preserves. Love never fails. Um, that's not what a lot of people experience in church. They experience the frosting on the cake, which is all the good stuff, right? All the, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, the bombing, right? But love in this chapter really was describing is a long suffering, a process that stays. That's not it's not a quick hit, right?
Right.
It's patient. Love is patient. It takes time. Some people come from situations where, like myself, that were very toxic, and I needed to be loved on a long term basis. Like I needed that long suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and so I that's what I love about God is that He never leaves us nor forsakes us. He's not going to give up on us, and that's the one thing that we can hold on to. And those of you that are out there that doubt that because of the human experience that you've had, um, I want to say that you have to go beyond that. Even if you're going to a good church that does it right, the Bible says that even fathers good fathers don't compare to God the Father, right? I mean, even the best people, the people that do this right, still can't compare to the purity and the way God does it in our lives. So don't give up on God. Don't give up on Him. I mean, you may want to shop around churches a little bit, but and I don't I say that laughing, but I absolutely
Absolutely.
mean that. Like,
Absolutely.
do not trust everybody's love, especially when they come on so strong. Um, that that to me, like Brian and I talked about this not too long ago about the the gut feeling that you get. Sometimes you have to listen to your gut. The church tells you not to. No, you have to listen to the Holy Spirit. Well, sometimes I don't know what that means, but sometimes to me that means actually that my gut. Like sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this doesn't feel
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it feels good, but it doesn't feel right. And that's what a lot of people have been commenting about the book. Even today, as I was talking to a couple of people, they were saying it just really confirmed what I kind of knew, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it felt good getting bombed by love, but didn't feel right. And that's what you have to kind of go back to is don't get sucked in by the free drugs at the beginning, because that's what drug dealers do, right? They give you the
Yep.
free stuff and then they hook you, right? Don't do that. Check it out. Go to that church for a while before you start tithing or giving or whatever you're going to do. I mean, don't just give them your soul. You know, watch what happens. Watch for a while. Be vigilant. Be aware. In John chapter 15, verse 13, it says, "Excuse me. There's no greater love than one that lays down his life, for a friend." And obviously, that's talking about Jesus Christ. But the church, that's if we're talking about love here in loving people, there has to be a sacrifice. It can't just be all the frosting on the cake. It has to be real. Brian, why don't you wrap us up?
So we were told in church that God's love was unconditional. And let's just put this in a general context. I think we all understand that love, inherent with the word love, is that it comes without condition. Mike read 1 Corinthians 13, which has been read in a gazillion weddings across the planet, and that really paints a picture that love comes without condition. That love comes to give, not to get.
Right.
And when Mike talks about that gut feeling, I think we have a gut feeling when someone is after something, or conversely, when someone really is for us. When someone is willing to, I have a friend who's a pastor, and he's not my pastor, but he's a pastor. He has loved me through so many things. I mean, I've been so hard on him, I've made him cry, and he's a grown man. Uh, and he has loved me and stood by me, um, not because we agree with everything, not because I'm always nice, not because I'm pretty, not because I use churchy words, right? But he truly loves me, and I know that, I understand that, and that's a rare thing, and that's what we're looking to find. That's what we can trust. It's also what we're looking to give, and that's what we need. I think each and every one of us, when we can give that one to another, then that's how we make the world a better place. But we do need to be on guard, and we do need to set up boundaries, and we do not need to give our trust away easily.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great place to end this today. Thank you so much, you guys, for checking us out. I know we're gaining a lot of new friends on YouTube, and we'll be putting this out on Spotify and all the podcasts places. But right now, we're just doing this on YouTube. But thank you so much, and I would suggest that you try to get some of your friends who have been hurt. Again, we're not trying to necessarily expose people. Although Brian and I had this conversation this week, we're not going to shy back from telling our truth and telling our story either,
Right.
because it does involve individual people that have been called out publicly and maybe need to some more. I don't know, um, but I'm not shying back from that. And somebody might say, "Well, you're targeting a person." No, not really. This is part of my story, and that's the way it goes. So um, that's the way I feel about it, anyways. But I know there are a lot of people out there that didn't experience our exact experience, but they've had experiences with people who have manipulated, used them, all in the name of God. And we're not trying to be anybody's hero. We just want a place
Mm-hmm.
for to explain some of this stuff, and maybe even to get some of these people on. We're going to be having guests soon on here and talking about their story too. And so, yeah, so just keep telling your friends about it, and we'll try to meet those needs. In the notes underneath, if you want to leave a comment on some topics you might want to hear, would love to hear from you. So go ahead and do that. I'm also going to put the link to the book. If you still need to buy the book, you can do that on PayHip, and I'll leave that underneath. Also, you can follow us on Instagram. It's Groomed.Connect. Facebook is the same, Groomed.Connect. And also my website is MikeDonahueConnects.com. We're just trying to connect with people who have been through similar experiences, and we want to offer some help. So thank you so much for watching this, and have a great week.
See you, everybody.